Hey everyone. Hope everyone's doing well. I know the show's been away for a couple of weeks, unexpectedly. Had some health stuff pop up, and it kept me away from the show for a few weeks. Everything's fine, everyone's fine. Rumors of our demise have been greatly over-exaggerated. But the important thing here is that we're back, and I have a fantastic episode lined up for you today. So today I have both Paul Schnackenburg and Eric Siron on the show, and today we're talking about a topic I wrote about in the SysAdmin Weekly newsletter a couple of weeks back. So I talked about the fact that we've seen a massive consolidation of compute resources into all the major cloud players over the last couple of years, right? And we've even seen some indication from the large players that, hey, why don't you, use a virtual desktop with us as well too, right? And all this consolidation and the scarcity of memory in the market, storage in the market, now it's starting to beg the question of what happens when access to compute is a subscription privilege and no longer an owned capability, right? So Eric, Paul, and I, we dive into this topic, we talk about it from multiple angles, and it really turned into a fantastic episode. So hope you enjoy today's episode of SysAdmin Weekly. Hey everyone, it's a new week. That means it's time for another episode of SysAdmin Weekly. This is your podcast by sysadmins for sysadmins and dedicated to all the tireless tech folks working in the trenches day in and day out to keep the digital world spinning. As always, I'm your host, Andy Serwich, and a little bit different than usual. Instead of just one regular co-host, I've got my two most frequent co-hosts with me on the show today. I've got both Eric Siron and I've got Paul Schnackenburg with me. Paul, how you doing?
I'm really good, thanks, Andy. How are you?
Doing good. Eric, I'm just going to ignore you and move on to our main topic. No, I'm just joking. How are you doing, Eric? Good to see you, my friend.
I'm fine being ignored. You can continue on.
Oh, you both know I wouldn't ignore either one of you. But good having you both on here. And I've got you both on the show today because we've got a very interesting topic to talk about today. And what it comes down to is a bit of a question. There's been a lot of, how do I put it nicely here? A lot of changes in the industry lately in terms of centralized AI, centralized compute, especially. You think about all of, the large compute, cloud compute companies that are out there today, Azure, AWS, Oracle, Google Compute, right? All the big players. And there's a question that I've thought of myself, but also I've seen come up in the community time and time again is this equation dangerous for society? So, I mean, yes, kind of a large existential topic, right? But there's a lot of sysadmin talking points, a lot of sysadmin considerations in this conversation. And I thought, who better than to have both Eric and Paul on for this particular discussion? So looking forward to talking to you guys about this one today. I think it's going to be a good one. But as always, we have our two recurring segments that we do at the beginning of every show. So I want to make sure we jump. I'm not sure which way I was going with that, but jump straight into those because with three of us, it's going to take a little bit of extra time. But I'll start with our News React segment. This is the segment of the show where my co-hosts and I, we discuss some news topic that caught our eye over the last week or two. And I guess, Eric, being as I, kind of shunned you in the opening, I will allow you to go first for the News React segment. What do you got, my friend?
I don't know that I saw an actual headliner on this, but I noticed that the big tech stocks went down this week very dramatically. And Bitcoin and several of its little followers have also gone way down recently. And it's making me curious, or is the world are they starting to catch on that this open AI thing is, AI in general, I always blame Sam Altman for all the AI problems, but AI in general is not delivering what it was promised, and I think the world's catching on to that. Just my guess. We'll see.
It's funny, I've seen a couple of different articles recently talking about the disparity between the promise of AI and the reality, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
The general consumer, not us sysadmins in the trenches, but you go talk to the average person on the street, and the assumption with AI is that you just tell it a few things and it removes all of life's friction for you.
Mhm.
Well, we in this room and those listening, we all know that that's not the case, right? So it's interesting that theme has come up again and again the last week or two. So I saw that as well, Eric. The other thing that, and I'm sure this will come up a few times in the episode, and we're not getting political in this particular episode, but
Try not to.
I think there's proof, right, that there's a lot of volatility in the U.S. market because of certain things. I'm sure you can imagine what I'm talking about. The U.S. government, let's put it that way. And so I haven't dug into the drop in the tech stocks myself, but lately when I see stuff like that, I'm like, okay, did somebody say something or
Yeah,
do
there's
something?
definitely a lot going on around it. Tech was hit especially hard, and
Yeah,
I'm just really watching that, especially and something maybe we ought to explore. And I know it's a little bit off topic for our podcast, but have been watching a few other things, and people really starting to pull Sam Altman out a little bit more and realize this guy's he's not really a technology person at all. He's really just kind of good at selling things that sound good to people who don't know much about technology and then selling it out right before people figure out there was never anything there to sell. It's kind of how he got to where he is today, and it makes you go, oh, huh.
Charismatic leaders that don't necessarily have the goods in the bag that they should be
Right.
delivering.
And it's
I
easier for guys like that to push it because he doesn't know enough about the technology to know it's not possible.
They're right. He doesn't know enough to say, well, hang on, is that really the way it works?
Yeah.
So my comment on your news would definitely be that one of the reasons I think is that the actual uptake of AI in businesses is lagging. Like Silicon Valley and the tech companies have always lived in the future, right? Like to them, things just happen in business, right? But businesses don't operate at that speed, right? And never has, and certainly never. I mean, this is not going to happen. So it always is an inertia, takes time, right? So, for example, I think one of the reasons that is affecting the stock market for tech stocks is that Microsoft now came out and said they have 15 million paying users of Microsoft 365 Copilot. I'm one of them. But I have 450 million users of Office 365 or Microsoft 365. That equates to about 3%, right?
Yeah, that's not.
They've been banging that drum for 3 years now, 2.5, 3 years. Like I, as a Microsoft partner, 95% of all the webinars they send me that I should go and look at and learn about is all how can you increase the adoption? Here are some deals. You get a deal the first year. It's all about that. And I have had Microsoft 365 Copilot rolled out to customers, but none of them yet have seen, oh, wow, this is amazing. We couldn't run our business without it. We're way far away from that, right? And now it's all about agents, right? So I think there's a massive disconnect between what AI can do for businesses and what the tech companies want their customers to be at this point.
Well, I don't
I
know
think
what the
that's
two
part
of
of the
you have
bubble.
seen. I'm not sure what the two of you have seen, but outside of tech and just your other companies that aren't considered tech, there's all these mandates. You have to use AI, you have to use AI. And I know several people there that are like, it's just not good at anything.
Yeah, I know.
It just can't
I'll
do
tell
it.
you.
So they're like, we're working harder to hit these ridiculous quotas of, the AI mandate, but we can't get our job done because it doesn't actually help.
No,
And
I,
it's a flop.
it can absolutely be a flop. There are some places where it does make a difference, but not in the way the business bosses think. You see, the business bosses go in. So IBM is the huge one here, right? So I just heard this at a webinar this week. Guy was working at IBM. So 230,000 people worldwide. The AI boom starts happening. This was probably a year and a half ago, something like that, maybe 2 years ago. And they have their own Watson X, right? That's their internal LLM thingy. So they wanted to go to market to show that they were a modern AI leading company. So they mandated training for 230,000 staff to learn about Watson X and use it in their daily life. Of course, it didn't work. Like, everybody attended the training, right? Few videos, click, click, click. I've done the Q&A at the end, so I understood what I was learning, but they didn't really learn anything, didn't really change anything. But IBM could then go to market and say, look, we trained all of our staff and we're all using Watson X and it's fantastic, right? And I think that disconnect is the problem. We're being sold a gold Maserati, but what it actually ends up for the ordinary person trying to do work day to day, right? And where it actually can help them. It's a, I don't know, Fiat, maybe 10-year-old Fiat with a bit of rust on it, but it helps here and there if you want to get from A to B, but it's not going to fix a whole lot of other stuff. And that's just the reality of it.
I think AI companies and AI enthusiasts, I'll say, they want AI to be used so much and to such great degree that they'll say anything to get it adopted. The thing I don't see in the industry is I don't see a lot of people saying, here are the things that you can do to get actual value out of AI. I think that's the component that the industry is missing at large. And the one thing with, I'm going to pick on Microsoft a bit here before we, move on to your news item, Paul. But the thing with Microsoft and Copilot and them pushing it again and again and again, what it reminds me of, not from a technical perspective, but from a pure marketing perspective. You remember when Disney bought Star Wars?
Mm-hmm.
And it was Star Wars, Star Wars, Star Wars, Star Wars. Here's some more Star Wars, again and again and again. And it actually hurt their viewership of the Star Wars IP because they oversaturated it. And sometimes I wonder if Microsoft is, I don't wonder. Yeah, it's pretty definitive. It's pretty definitively well known that they're pushing Copilot too much, right?
Yeah. And they've also burned a lot of us that we've realized what's going to happen is they're going to get that thing. This is the thing. And this is this week's thing. It's going to be Copilot, 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 and then they're going to drop it. And it's going to go on the back burner and it'll never get done. So before they move on to their next fascination.
Yep.
So like
This
anymore,
could become-
getting emotionally invested in a Microsoft technology is it's terrible. It's a terrible idea.
You just need a good therapist afterwards, I think.
That's right.
Help you deal with the what do you call it? Attachment loss.
Yeah, they loved it so much and then they just abandoned it midstream. I don't know why. Like, when have they not done that? So come on.
I think this is its own episode at the rate we're going. Like, there's like 3 more things I want to say about this particular topic, but that's not what we're talking about today. But anyway, good one, Eric. Paul, what do you got for a news react item?
So this is going to be a hard left turn for us here. I subscribe to 404media.co. Warmly recommend them. Independent journalists in the US writing some really interesting tech articles. And there's a link in the show notes for this particular news story. I just found it fascinating the way that, in particular, US companies, because they don't have GDPRs, they don't really have to care. So there is this company that has been stood up to help people with porn addiction. And as you can imagine, you have to feed that thing some fairly sensitive information. And then they built it on top of Google Firebase, I think, which has known vulnerabilities in it. And of course, everybody's journal entries and all their other data was leaked and is available. And they contact the developer. And he says, initially, it's like, oh, yeah, well, go fix that. And then it's like, no, but the researcher who told me this, he could just be making it up. It should be fake. So they went in, added their own account, added their own data to it, fake data. Then they went and looked in the database. Well, it's not fake because we can actually see the data. We just added to it. So it's still public. And then he just hung up and refused to talk to them. So, the modern cloud world, man, and people not caring about other people's You have to have some real moral failings where you're like, yeah, tell me all your absolutely intimate secrets, put them in my database, and I will just leave that public to the world.
There's 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 so much wrong here. So one, I'm not victim blaming here, but anytime I see a credit card field on a form somewhere online, I'm like, do I really want to put my credit card number in there? I asked myself about 4 times. So there's that aspect of it. But here's the other part of it is like, from an operational security standpoint, from an OPSEC standpoint, that's the type of information that an attacker could use to coerce somebody into doing something on a network that they probably shouldn't do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like,
It's also something that can make somebody kill themselves if it becomes
yes,
public. So there's
yes.
some real consequences here.
Oh man, that's just so rough to see stuff like that because, oh, like you said, the modern cloud-first world. Oh,
Yeah, I have a
And
theory.
anyway.
Google
Cloud
does not
can-
check, right? They check their apps for the exact layout of the app, right? Exactly that it follows their layout guide for how it should look. But they don't go and look to see their backend database that they host, right? Like it's a Google thing, right? Did you
Right.
configure this correctly or did you just leave it open to the world? That's not part of the app check. So app's fine.
Unfortunate. What were you saying, Eric?
I just have a theory that the cloud is basically gives all these developers a place to hide how bad their software is because when you bring it in house and you install it on your computer and you watch all the errors and everything and the logs going berserk, you know what's going on. But when you're consuming something that's fully behind a old garden, all you have is your web interface. I
Yeah, there's probably some truth to that. I'm not a developer by any stretch of the imagination, but yeah, there's probably some truth to that. So anyway, I guess it's time to move on to our nerd hour segment of the show, and it's kind of a joke, right? It doesn't take an hour. If you want to learn the whole story behind Nerd Hour, go listen to some of the early segments where I explain the joke. But basically, this is a segment of the show where my co-host and I we talk about the geeky, nerdy things that we've been doing here, and. You know what? I'm so excited to get to my Nerd Hour segment that I didn't talk about my News
I
React
was just
segment.
going to say, do you have any news?
I do, and it's really cool to talk about. Well, some people might think it's terrifying, but it's really cool from a cybersecurity standpoint, because of course my item is cybersecurity related. Have either of you guys heard of VoidLink out of curiosity?
No, not really.
So we've been saying this as a cybersecurity industry for a long time. At some point, AI is going to be used to make very powerful malware. Well, it has happened. So VoidLink is the name of a new, fully AI created, not just piece of malware, but a malware framework. And I'll post the Hacker News link in the show notes about this. These were findings found. Boy, I'm great with the words today. This research was done by the folks over at Checkpoint, but basically they came across a piece of malware, malicious code that the attacker has called VoidLink. And essentially, it is, like I said, an entire malware framework. It consists of 88,000, 5 digits, 88,000 lines of code. Came out early December. And, I won't go into the entire breakdown because it is a very sophisticated piece of malware. And there's lots of different pieces of it. And the researchers were able to tell because of detected folder structure and things like that exactly how it was pieced together. And the single person who appears it was made by a single person, but it looks like what they did is they used agents and made teams of agents with their own little development jobs. This team does this team does this, and they basically treated it like it was its own software development agency, right? And the AI that enabled all of this was a coding agent known as Tray Solo. So it's spelled Trae. So Tray Solo, and the word like solo, like Han Solo, speaking of Star Wars, right? And so, yeah, I'll put the link in the show notes to this. But, for the longest time here in the cybersecurity space, we've been saying at some point there's going to be not just, little onesie twosie pieces of malware made by AI, but something truly unique, something truly large, and well, looks like it's happened with Void Link. So I'll let everybody read that article and make their own determination. But yeah, it's not great. So that's what I got for News React. Anyway, we will move on to, again, Nerd Hour. So I've already introduced that segment, so we'll just pretend I did everything correctly and we'll move straight into it. So again, this is the part of the show where my co-host and I, we talk about the geeky, nerdy things we've been doing in our spare time. So Paul, we'll start with you. What's geeky, nerdy things you've been working on lately?
So this is going to be very low key compared to the high stakes stuff I sometimes talk about. So I have a Surface Pro, whatever the ARM based model, and it's got 64 gigs of RAM. And you would think I was using that for some virtual machines or some advanced coding or something, or video editing, but I'm not. I'm simply using it because I can open lots and lots and lots and lots of browser windows that I promised myself I'm eventually going to get to read. And by the time I get to about 1,000 open tabs,
I
because they
thought I
open
was
again
bad.
when you restart your computer, right? So they're all there. So when you're using Edge or Chrome, so I use both. So what I found is that I had to rein in the madness. So so there's two tips I have for you here. The first one is Control-Shift-A. Works in Edge and works in Chrome. That lets you search through your open tabs. So if you've got a few hundred tabs open or 50 tabs open and you go, hey, where's that tab? So you just Control-Shift-A and then you can type it in and it'll show you any tab that matches your keyword. That's number one. Number two is I use collections in Edge. So this is a built-in feature. For years I used Get Pocket, which is was a handy way of saving stuff. Came from Firefox or Mozilla, but they discontinued that, so it's not available yet anymore. So I use collections in Edge that lets me save pages so that I can get back to them without them having to be open and chewing up memory on my computer. And the final one, again, a little handy tip that I found. Maybe everybody already knows this, but I found it, I don't know, a year ago or something. So I often have cause to paste in the same information in various forms and places and things. So if you use Windows V rather than Control V on the Control V on Windows, you get a clipboard history. You enable that, and now it will remember things that you pin to your clipboard forever, including through reboots. So you now have little text snippets or images or whatever else you want there, sitting in a nice little list of things that you can just paste in with a normal, Windows V and Windows C for copy, or Control
Nice.
C. So
That's
handy that
that's
feature.
a handy tool. Because there's a lot of times I could. It reminds me of, like command line history on like a bash shell or something like that. My only question would be, where does it store that history? Do you know? Out of curiosity.
It's on the local computer. The clipboard history is on the local computer. It does not sync between computers.
Right.
Like even if you have Windows on both of them, I have to set it up on each of the computers. So
Gotcha. Okay. Now that could be useful too for some, some of that family help desk support I provide. I could see that being useful for, like my mom or something like that could really use something like that. My fear would be her cutting and pasting passwords and then it ending up statically in a list somewhere. That's a whole different thing, but
well, you've got to go
useful
in
tool.
once you've copied something and it's in the clipboard history. Unless you pin it, it will just disappear next time the computer is rebooted. So you actually have to go into the clipboard history and pin it and say, I want to keep this thing.
Right.
If you don't do that, it won't keep it.
She won't do that. So we're
You
good.
can't get your
That
folks to use
works.
password manager either? Is that what I'm hearing?
What's that?
Or you can't get your folks to use a password manager either?
Wait, yeah, another piece of software that we have to, remember how to use. Yeah,
Hmm.
no, no. So anyway,
I mean,
all right.
the 12 PDF readers they installed on their phone because they were encouraged to do so, those are okay, but
Yep, yep. I've had stuff like that before as well too. Oh man, this could be another episode idea. We're gonna need like the family, what is it? The family IT support storyline or something like that, right?
Yep.
sounds like
Beer money support line.
another Halloween scare episode.
I know. Maybe that's the Halloween episode for this coming year. There we go. Yeah.
Like you're
Anyway.
like, my mom called and said she received a call from someone she didn't know, and now she needs help with her Venmo account.
Oh. Or I could see it also going this way too. Where's the best place to get like 10 Apple gift cards?
Yeah.
The-
How do I get a Bitcoin to send to this nice young man that
oh man, yeah.
Real,
we
real
go.
world story is, how do I go and buy gold? And in the places where you buy gold, they have signs up on the walls. If somebody you didn't know sent you here, it's a scam. And they
go
literally
away?
still walk up to the desk and say, I want to buy gold. Oh, who are you buying it for? Oh, this guy on the net. Like, it's a scam. No, it's not. I have to do this.
I'm sure
People
this
get
time. I'm
incredibly
sure.
invested in the scam once they bought in.
Oh, he's a nice boy. He seems trustworthy. Oh, yeah. There's
No,
a
it's
Not you
whole.
last time, but this time I think he's real.
Oh man, there's a whole rabbit hole we could go down here. Anyway, Eric, nerd hour item. What do you got, my friend?
Oh, mine's smaller. I've had some overflow from work. I've run into this really bizarre problem with some Windows servers that just do not want to talk to each other, and they won't tell me why. They're just and I've actually let it flow into my regular life. Like, this is so weird. I just keep checking on it or working on it, hacking at it. So yeah, I may have a new blog article in the mix if I can figure it out. I've even got Microsoft support engaged, and I'm like, yeah, that's weird. I know.
Oh, wow. All right.
Have you done a packet capture to look at what's actually happening on the wire?
I've got so many captures and
Oh my God.
event log
Now-
traces and
Now I'm emotionally invested now. Like I need to know how this goes. It's like
Yeah, definitely.
I
interesting.
will
All
try to
right.
keep everybody updated. It's keeping me up at night, and that hasn't happened in a long time.
Well, you're gonna have to give us the update on that when you find out, because yeah, interesting. All right. I will be I'll be here waiting patiently to find out the answer. Next
Yep.
time on SysAdmin Weekly.
If we're lucky,
Anyway.
it could be longer. I've been pecking at this thing for 3 months, and it's just really gotten. At first, it just seemed like, oh, that's a little quirk. I'll figure it out later. I'll figure that out later. And then it started actually affecting people and fix this. I'm like, I honestly don't know how.
It's like it's like we're teasing next summer's blockbuster. That's what we're doing, so.
It's like the Marvel post-credit scene.
Exactly. That's
The
right.
next movie. The reveal.
That's right.
Either I'll be back or I'm just, and you'll come on and Eric has announced his retirement. We will not be hearing from him again.
Watch, one of the DNS servers was wrong or something like that. Something really
Yeah, I
simple,
was just
right?
gonna say,
It was the DNS.
really simple. It could be one of those, because I have had many of those in my life where you think it's something really technically complicated, and then somebody comes along and says, "Have you tried plugging the cable in properly?"
I was just gonna make the joke. It's layer 1 of the OSI model.
Yeah. Is this supposed to be out?
All right. I'm gonna pull us back on the rails here. So my nerd hour item is not quite as mysterious, but as folks that have been listening to the show in the recent past know, that I have been slowly moving all of my home and lab workloads into containers running on top of a lightweight Kubernetes cluster. I now have 4 nodes in the cluster. I am standing up one more node, and that will allow me to have fully redundant control planes as well as worker nodes. So In the Kubernetes world, you have control plane nodes, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's management. And then you have worker nodes. You can have nodes be both, but it's easier if they're not, in my opinion. And so I had been running on one one control plane node, which is a pain in the butt when I have to take that machine down for maintenance. Well, soon I won't have to worry about that anymore. I can drop any of the machines I want at any time and patch to my heart's content. So there we go. That's my nerd hour item. So more nerdy Kubernetes stuff that I've been into lately. So anyway, what do you think, guys? Should we get into our main segment, our main topic?
Let's
Go for
So, as a reminder, our main topic for the episode is we are talking about the centralization of AI and, more importantly, the centralization of compute in general, and whether or not that could be deemed to be, quote unquote, dangerous for society, right? And what I want to do here to kind of set the scene is kind of walk through my line of thinking, the sequence of events, or I guess I should say the sequence of news articles I came across over a several day period that culminated in this particular episode. And so kind of what started this whole thing was, I don't remember the exact headline. And again, I'm not going to get into the politics of things, right? Because politics is not what the show is about. And well, that's a whole different podcast. So we're not getting into the politics of things, but I will say the headline that kickstarted this whole thing was a headline about big tech companies and how some of them are bankrolling the midterm election stuff for Trump and the Republicans. So, okay, I didn't go into which big tech companies are doing it. I can make some guesses. The important part for this conversation is the fact there is a group of players in big tech that are pumping money into the 2026 midterm elections in the US to influence a desired outcome. That is the important piece of that headline for this discussion. So then after I saw that, I'm like, okay, we have big tech trying to influence a certain outcome. All right. And then it reminded me of a article I came across, I think it was on Windows Central, I don't know, about a week before that, where they had mentioned a conversation or an interview with Jeff Bezos, where Jeff Bezos had basically talked about, here at AWS, we really want people to start renting a cloud PC instead of owning their own PC, right? So instead of, having to buy really expensive hardware and buy a physical PC for your desk or a laptop or whatever, you can just use a tablet and you can log into the AWS cloud and run Windows from there or whatever operating system you want to run, right? So there's that part of it. And then as an umbrella over the entire tech industry right now, I think about the current RAM shortage that is happening, right? I forget exactly where it's at today, but last I checked, some RAM prices seem to be quadruple what they were, a year ago.
Yeah.
Like crazy expensive. And I've seen some reports in tech news that say, it's largely for future AI data center workloads, right? So it's future demand for memory that has driven it. Now, whether that's exactly the case or not, I haven't dug that far into it. Point of the matter is there is a very real memory shortage, right? Which then led me down the line of thinking of like, okay, if there's a RAM shortage, we have scarcity in compute hardware because of that. If you've got large tech companies that are trying to push people to use their hardware for compute workloads, so they're just their everyday normal compute stuff, and you have big tech players actively getting involved in politics to influence the market and nations one way or the other, it brought up this question in my mind, right? Of like, okay, is there a method to this madness? Now, again, maybe I'm getting a little tinfoil hat here, right? But when I look at this and I think that, okay, right now the perception in the world is that AI equals inferencing, which equals information and power, right? Theoretically, by consolidating hardware, consolidating the ability to do compute into the hands of a few, which means now you've consolidated the use of AI, really big, strong, powerful AI models into the hands of a few large players, take away the ability for your average consumer to run their own local compute anywhere near that degree. Now you're in a world where you kind of influence, in a way, intelligence, right? The output of compute at large. And now I go back into my sysadmin systems thinking, and I'm thinking like, this really feels like a single pane, or not a single pane of glass, a single point of failure, right? Now we are depending on a small number of players to provide services that are becoming increasingly more critical for society. And that seems like a bad, dangerous thing. And so that was the premise for this entire episode. And before I start going through our main talking points here, Eric, Paul, I want to give you guys a chance to respond to kind of my intro there. I don't know if there's anything you want to add. Eric, I'll start with you.
Well, yeah, historically that has not worked out well. Putting everything into the hands of a few people. There's the phrase, the power corrupts absolute, power corrupts absolutely. And it is true. It is 100% true. You have so few times in history where one person was handed unlimited power and then they gave it back. Like 3 or 4 times that I know of, and I'm a fairly diligent student of history. So this is you have a right to be concerned. You should be.
Yeah.
And my hope, and as I have been kind of reading some other tea leaves, is every action has an equal and opposite reaction, and I think people are getting disgusted with the course of everything, and I think what's gonna happen is people are gonna start revolting in their own little ways, like, for me, if I want a book, I buy it on bookshop.org instead of Amazon, and things like that, so you're right to be concerned. I think the world is already reacting to it, even though a lot of people don't know it, if that makes sense.
So I got two comments initially from listening to your intro, Andy. I completely agree with you too, Eric. The first one is local AI. So there's been a lot of talk about, AI hardware. You can buy laptops now with NPUs. That Surface I talked about before has an NPU on it. I've played a little bit. I've downloaded some AI Foundry models and run them on my local NPU. And it's fine, but it's not going to, like, unless I invested a lot of time in it, it's not really going to become a part of my everyday work unless like somebody like Microsoft or whoever provides like an easy one-click here. Now you can run your AI locally and it'll be great, right? And it'll understand how to keep up with everything else, right? That's just not happening yet, at least not that I've seen, to make it sort of consumer friendly. That's number one. Number two, we're going to skirt close to politics here again, but I can't help it. So I'm the non-US person on this call, right? So I'm from the outside watching the gigantic slow motion train wreck. And I think what you don't realize, I mean, you guys obviously do, but what a lot of people don't realize in the US is that by pivoting 180 from we are part of the Western democratic world as a superpower, and we have lots of friends in all sorts of countries, whether it's Europe or Australia or New Zealand, on the other side of the planet. Most Americans wouldn't even know where that is. Well, Lord of the Rings, maybe. But anyway, point is that that by turning 180 on those people, you are putting a massive kick in the balls of US tech companies, right? Tell you what, even before Trump 2.0, I was talking to my clients and saying, look, if I had a choice of a non-US platform to offer you, an Office 365 SaaS platform that I could offer you that didn't come from the US, that was good enough, absolutely. There'd be no conversation. We could have that look at that pricing, compare features. Is this something we want to do? But there
Right.
is no choice. There is no choice. There's
Today,
an indie platform
today.
today. Today, that's true.
And that is
Today,
where well, that's what I was thinking right there is today, there's not, but some
yeah,
people are just getting so frustrated.
they are.
What is Blue Sky? Blue Sky is Twitter was great enough, and then they turned it into X and went to hell, so let's make Blue
Yeah,
Sky. Blue Sky is now got problems of its own. So the whole thing is basically they consolidated and it immediately forced a splinter faction to create its own rival thing. And so
yeah.
like my long-term thought is like, I don't know how to build a RAM chip in my backyard, but the materials are everywhere for the most part, right? There's gonna be other people come up and go, you know what? If I can't buy it, RAM from Corsair or from uh, Micron or whatever, okay, maybe it's time we get together when we make our own RAM. And maybe it's time to decentralize this stuff. And again, you're like, oh yeah, I'd love to sell this to you, but I can't find one elsewhere. You're not the only one with the problem.
Mm,
You know how many billions
mm.
of people have that problem. So what's going to happen? Eventually, somebody somewhere is going to go, fine, we'll just make our own, and they'll get enough people
Mm.
together to do it. It's
Yeah, that's right. That's the point. You need to have enough people together because the difference with technology 50 years ago, you could do that, and technology today is you got to build a RAM factory.
yeah,
That
and
is not something you do in your backyard. You know what I mean? Like it's a
exactly
big thing. But
correct. Yeah, and even though this exact scenario we're looking at is new, the basics around it are not.
yeah,
It's
no,
always been like what we have is good enough. The people who run it into the ground and eventually they hit critical mass where everybody else gets mad enough, well, fine, we'll just do it differently then. If
yeah.
you right and so Andy, I think you're right. I think we've seen this in the past in different contexts and everything that Paul just said, absolutely correct. So at
I
least
also think
that's my hopeful spin on what we're talking about.
yeah, yeah, that's right. That's my hopeful spin as well. I think Europe will have a really large role to play. They're already starting. France has told all their government agencies to move away from Teams and move to Matrix.
Hmm.
That's the first step on that road. That is a multi-year road, but I could see in, say, 2 years, 3 years, some sort of competitor springs up in Europe that offers, hey, we're not US. Right, like US laws
Yeah.
does not apply to us. You can host with us. We got GDPR. We got our shit together when it comes to data protection. They don't. Come and host with us, right? Or come and run your SaaS apps here or whatever it is.
Yep.
So I can see that happening. Europe is very slow though, so but I can see that happening.
But looking around in
Mm,
other places, like one thing I was thinking about, like United States, we were the first to
mm,
fly, we were the first to the moon, we were the first in a lot of major things, and now I'm reading in the newspaper like all these major discoveries and things, really big things that would have happened in the United States, except for we decided, well, we don't want to be innovative anymore. We just want to turn out a profit on everything. So these other countries who are historically not like there was something that happened like in Mexico that like, wow, that's something that we should have done. We should have had the collective research power to do that first. And but there's just it's not the same. It's like the United States has forfeited its leadership in a lot of places, and
yeah,
the rest of the world's
yeah,
going to step up. It was fine when we were doing it and doing it well, and okay, that's fine. But we're forcing the rest of the world to step up in a different, you know,
yeah. It's definitely shifting the power dynamics. That's been happening for a really long time. And the
yes,
conundrum there, the reason capitalism doesn't work for that is that basic science doesn't pay. It only pays one time out of 200. And the
yeah,
classic example here is a US researcher that found out about these worms that were destroying crops. He was researching something completely different.
yeah,
But in the end, after him, focusing 15 years or whatever on his life on this thing, right, was that the agriculture industry realized that what he had found was the solution to a huge problem they had, right? And it saved, billions of dollars worth of crop all over the world. But it only happened because he did the basic science that he wasn't even thinking about agriculture. He wasn't even thinking about those things. Right?
mhm,
Something completely unrelated. I can't remember the details now. This is years ago that I heard this. But the point is that if you look at basic science as an investment, you go, well, there were 200 other or 199 other science projects we invested in, and they were all didn't come to anything or didn't come to something useful. You wouldn't invest in basic science. And that's basically what you're doing. Like, there's a huge brain drain in the US. Lots of professors are getting really nice offers from elsewhere. Hey, your government is anti-science. Would you like to come and work for us? We're pro-science. We got the deal for you, mate. And, academics aren't tied necessarily to their country. So,
Right. And one thing that a lot of people don't know here about the United States is like there's always all these talk about research and development for drug companies. For decades, most of that was done on university campuses, and then but they were public universities. And after basically students and professors would come up with a drug, right? They would do all the research, and then they would have to turn it over to the to the private sector, and they like you never even hear about it. And then it comes out with the Eli Lilly stamp on it. Eli Lilly didn't do the work on it; some university did somewhere. And here in the last, I mean, there's been a war on education my entire life, but it's really started to crank up in the last decade or so. And everybody here now is anti-university and anti-investment. There are all these terrible things that people think, and so all those things that you were talking about, well, at one point, all the failures were happening in the universities, and then the handful of successes were just going straight into the private sector. So that everything you were talking about, like the big companies didn't pay for the failures, the people did, right? Well, now nobody's funding the universities at all. So
not in the US.
Yeah.
Not in the US.
And I only know about the drug stuff. I don't know what other industries did that kind of thing, but that's one
I'm
reason we're
sure
kind of
it's
falling behind. It's like now the only thing we have is usually anyway.
it will have far-reaching implications that I don't think we could even predict today.
No.
I think it's going to be years before we know the full extent
No.
of the damage there, unfortunately.
Yeah,
I read an absolutely fascinating thing. So prior to World War II, most scientific papers were published in German. And
I
if you
believe
wanted to
that.
be an academic scientist, you learned German because that was the language that the scientific papers came out in. After World War II, English, for obvious reasons, right? The US leader in science for many decades. And there was an academic who wrote this post, and they said at the bottom, just as a completely unrelated corollary, I'm learning Chinese. I thought,
I think
it's a
probably where
goal.
the United States really started sitting on its history was when, because a lot of those discoveries we were talking about came from former Nazi scientists. So we're like, let's kind of be hush hush on the Nazi part. Contributions they made are obviously great, but maybe let's be a little quiet about where that came from.
Yeah, it's an interesting world. The one thing that you mentioned, Eric, that I wanted to swing back to is you mentioned, we've got the centralization of power in compute and cloud services and AI as a result, right? How there always tends to be an equal and opposite reaction. And I am absolutely seeing that in a lot of my circles in the tech space. You and I actually did an episode of this podcast, I want to say episode 6, 7, 8, somewhere in that area, where we talked about cloud repatriation and how there is a growing cloud repatriation movement. Now, I only expect that to accelerate, especially on the EU side, because rightly so, a lot of EU companies don't want to be tied to U.S. tech companies for a number of reasons. But I can also see this in myself too. So I mean, I've had a couple of gripes about Microsoft over the last couple year or two now, 2-3 years now, and both of you know that 5 years ago I was like Mr. Microsoft, run Hyper-V, all the things, Microsoft stuff everywhere, right? There is one Windows box in my entire house now. On the flip side of that, there are now 16 different Debian Linux instances in the house. I'm running more Linux in my home lab now than I ever have in the past. And I, you know, the other part of this, and I said this in my initial text message to you when we started planning this episode, Eric, was, with all of this in mind about the consolidation of compute, the consolidation of cloud services, all this AI, all the politics stuff that's getting intertwined in all this, that 10-year-old motherboard and AMD CPU sitting on the end table over there, and that NVIDIA 3050 Ti that's just casually sitting on my table across the office, all of a sudden feels a lot more valuable than it did a week ago before I thought about all this, right?
Mm.
So, and it really, I think people are starting to wake up to the fact, and like you said, Eric, people are starting to make those little changes that right now are not hitting anyone's bottom line in a big way. But I think over time, eventually, it's going to cause some waves in the tech industry in certain ways. So Paul, I'll use your EU example here, right? I work for a vendor that is, well, we're owned by a US tech company now, but the subsidiary is based in the EU. And I have been hearing time and time again over the last 2 or 3 years the same thing. We don't want to be dependent on a US tech company, right? We want to, and that's not, that's not from customers. That's just from being. I have a foot in the EU tech space, and I hear things, right? That's basically what I'm saying there. And so, I think over time this will change the face of tech worldwide. That's my prediction. But
Yeah.
I think based on what you guys said earlier, we're probably in agreement with that. But
Yeah. So 2 comments. The first one is, I think us in IT for a long time, or even in cybersecurity, people who are in cybersecurity, have had the luxury of sort of treating computers as separate. Like if you look 10 or 15 years ago, there were attackers and there were defenders. But unless you were a huge company, you didn't really care where the attackers came from, right? Like they were after
yeah,
your money or but it wasn't really a thing, right? Now it is a huge thing because which company you are, where you are operating, and what other geopolitical influences you have, whether it's Europe versus the US, or whether it's, are you on somebody's radar? Are the Russians for some reason likely to target you, or the North Koreans, right? Like the North Korean IT workers scam thing. I mean, that's much bigger than people think, because everybody thinks, oh yeah, they're going after the big tech companies. They're going everywhere, right? Like
oh
having
yeah,
a North Korean working in your engineering that is building, I don't know, tractors or something, is a great place to be, right? He'll earn some money and he'll get some great information. So,
yep.
or she, I suppose, could be both. That's comment number one. Let's see if I can remember comment number two. Otherwise, I'll pound it over to you. Yeah, Eric, you go. I'll think about what my second comment was. Oh, cloud. Yeah, no, I got it. Cloud. So this only started, the only reason why you talking about like the concentration of power into AI data centers and the big tech companies, the only reason they can do that is because they laid the foundation of the last 10 or 15 years by getting us all hooked on cloud.
Yep.
Right? Because I can remember, as frequent listeners would know, years ago I was a teacher trainer at the equivalent of a US community college, I suppose it would be, but it's a countrywide thing in Australia called TAFE. Anyway, I was an IT teacher there, and I can remember when cloud started coming in, and all of my clients at the time, right, they were on small business server. Right? They had their own IT infrastructure, they had an internet connection, but they ran everything on that small business server: file sharing, printing, email, security, whatever, SharePoint. It's all there. That all has gone, right? Like I've literally just finished the final migration of the last of my clients that had on-premises server infrastructure. And they're all now in the cloud because that's the right thing to do for them, business-wise, technically, cost-wise, feature-wise, whatever. It's the right thing. But that only works when you trust the cloud. I still trust Microsoft, but I don't trust the US. So it's an issue.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Part
Eric,
of
I don't know if
that,
you have anything you want to
well,
add.
some of the whole thing with the trust with Microsoft, like Andy and I talked about, like there's both trust and mistrust for Microsoft at equal measure on different things. But like one thing, like, and I've said this several times, like I wouldn't go to Google Cloud because Google is and has always been a data broker.
Mhm.
Yep.
And so I do not ever trust like on Gmail. My Gmail is kind of a spam catch.
Mm,
When somebody's like, "Oh, what's your email address?" and I don't trust them, I give them a Gmail,
mm,
right? Or going to sign up for something at a store and they force you. I gotta give me an email address. I can't proceed with your transaction. Fine, here, and I give them Gmail. Right? I don't use it for anything serious because I don't trust Google. So Microsoft has historically not been a data broker. If they keep pushing this AI thing, collecting, they turn into data brokers, they're gonna lose a lot of that sort of that implicit, like, even if we don't necessarily trust certain things about Microsoft, they have historically not been stealing people's data,
mm,
right? But if they get too deep into some of this stuff like you're talking about here, that's gonna go away.
Yeah.
mm,
And I really strongly believe that, based on, something so my, wife, former prosecuting attorney, talks a lot of things about how people get away with things for years and years and years, and eventually they believe they can't be caught because they haven't been caught, and they get sloppy.
mm,
And so we can look at that in the criminal space, but you can look at it anywhere too. It's like, I think there's a feeling among the executive tier at Microsoft that we have always been first at this. So therefore we will always be first at this. And
mhm,
it never hasn't dawned on them yet that, well, a lot of it is because overtaking Microsoft is difficult, but not impossible. And the more they slip, the more they forfeit that trust, the more they disappoint people. So the phrase I use all the time, Andy, you're gonna probably like, ah, here he goes again. But change only comes when the pain of staying the same exceeds the pain of change.
Yep.
Yep.
And
Yep.
Wise words.
so the more they make it painful to set on Azure, on Microsoft 365, the more pain they add to that, on the belief that they can never be number two, right? Eventually somebody's like, I'm done. I've had it. Right? It's not that we can't beat Microsoft, it's just so far the effort and the payoff are just not really worth it. Like, the amount of effort you'd have to put in to take Microsoft down is too much, so that's why nobody's done it. Not that Microsoft products are the best, in some cases, they're not even good, but making a competing one is just not worth the effort, but the harder they make it, you know what I mean? They're raising the pain level of staying the same, basically, and they're gonna push the world
Yep.
to change.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
almost inevitable. You see it everywhere all the time because of people, again, like, "Well, we've always been number 1, so how can we not be number 1?" Like,
Mm.
that's not how that works. That's not how anything works. My
Yeah, well,
cat
you can see,
tells me
yeah,
to shut up, it's Paul's turn.
you can see that in the enshittification of Windows, right? Like how much,
Yeah.
there's ads in my Windows. Like I got Windows on my computer and I got ads. Like, go
Mhm.
away. I don't want ads. Stop it.
Nope.
And the telemetry they're collecting, it's all a bit dodgy. And that's where I don't think it's going to be a big thing. I think it's going to be all of these little thousand cuts, right?
Yep.
So all of a sudden you'll find out, oh, that AI agent that you put into my Windows to help me change settings in the control panel or in settings nowadays with natural language, that telemetry is actually flowing to Microsoft. And because of that, you can also see this thing that you didn't used to be
Yep.
seeing before. That sort of thing, right? Like it's going to be one of those.
Mhm.
Yeah, completely agree with you.
Yep. I will say that I don't know as if I've ever had this feeling any other time in my now 25-year career in the industry. There's always been a little bit of this under the surface, but now uh, what I'm getting at here is that for the first time, the IT space feels to me to be, in general terms, adversarial to the end user. You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
yeah.
It
Yeah.
feels adversarial to the end user in general. And there's always been a little bit of this under the hood by certain companies, but
Mhm.
now it feels like it's been normalized and it's okay, quote unquote, okay for every company to do it now. And I'm gonna pick on Firefox for an example here. And now Eric's probably like, oh, he's gonna rant about browsers again here, right?
I'm fine with that.
So people that listen to the show regularly know the last episode of 2025, I did a solo Andy rants about browsers for an hour episode. It was more nuanced and more informative than that, but that's my running joke, is I ranted about browsers for an hour. And the whole thing that prompted that episode was Firefox made the decision to start becoming an AI browser. And blah, blah, blah. I did a whole episode. I wrote a big, long blog post about it on andyontech.com, et cetera, et cetera. One of the things that I said was, sure, Mozilla has said that the user will always have the choice of whether to have AI turned on or not. And I also made the point that when it is advantageous to the business, or it is advantageous to the direction that the business wants to go, optional things tend to become the default. And once the default is the default, that's generally how it is for 80 to 90% of the user base, because your average user is not going to go turn off AI deep in the settings somewhere.
No.
Now, I don't want to say I was a prophet, right? I'm not saying I'm a prophet, but I saw a news article just the other day where, guess what? AI on in the browser for Firefox is already the default. So
Yeah.
I
Because of course
maintain
you're right.
that it feels like an
Often people
adversarial
who are
environment.
prophets are people who, let me tell you something. The number one predictor of future performance is past behavior. Okay. So you're like, I have seen this so many times. I bet this is what's going to happen. You're basically you're playing the odds. You're playing the short odds,
True.
the ones that are, you're on the 1 in 500, you're on the 500 side. Like, I know better. Right. So you're fine.
Well, I think Mozilla is struggling. I mean, their biggest contributor, as far as I know, money-wise, is Google. So,
Google. Yep.
Mhm.
And
So,
it's
it's
not by like a little bit. It's like a lot of their operating budget is from Google. Absolutely.
So,
Not a great place to be.
and that gives me a good segue to the next point I was going to make about this whole thing, right? Because I think the other thing that everybody is not thinking so much about, at least not people in tech, we tend to be very, like, technology overall to us is something good because it helps improve society and humanity and whatever, right? And I would never, like, often when people say to me, oh God, tech is so bad, we shouldn't be using all the kids in front of screens all day and it's mushing their brains and everything. And I'm like, yeah, but take that person who's in a wheelchair and can't move anywhere,
Yeah.
right? Like, what has technology done for that person for 20 years, right? Now they have a battery-powered wheelchair that they can drive around in. They have connections to people all over the world that they would never be able to see, right? Or somebody who's blind or disabled in some other way. Like, there's lots and lots and lots of ways that technology, health-wise, I mean, obviously you work for a health organization, Eric, like modern medical technology is amazing, right? I just had a baker's cyst drain behind my knee yesterday, and I was in an MRI machine so they could find that thing and suck it out, and like it's all incredibly. 100 years ago, I would just have been hobbling along for the rest of my short life until I died, basically, because there was no fix for that thing, right? But I do think that what we got to think about is the overall technology impact. So, a few years ago, Microsoft said we are going to go carbon neutral by 2035, I think it was. Not only will we not add any more carbon to the atmosphere, we will also remove all the carbon that we have put in since 1975. They were going to go carbon negative, I think. So that's what they were. Well, they've given up, right? There's no way they can do it because the build out of their AI data centers are now happening so fast, and there isn't enough renewable energy around where they need to build them, particularly in the US. Not making it political, but your president is an idiot. But the interesting thing is, how are they meeting that now? How are they dealing with it? So I just dropped another note that you'll put in the show notes from a new site here where they talk about how Google is now going, well, we can't do that either. Like, we can't be carbon neutral or anything. We just need all this power. So how are we going to do it? Well, they're going to build a fossil fuel power plant themselves next to some of their data centers to power them. But they go, well, how can we make that look like we're not doing something bad? So they're actually changing how these things are measured at the very core of the whole thing, not just fudging the numbers at the end, but they're measuring how it's measured, measured in the very beginning. So have a read of that article. I thought that was very interesting. And obviously all the other tech companies are doing the same thing, right? Like they've got to justify this somehow, because their investors are going to, in their investors call, they're going to say, well, hang on a second, you said you were going to go carbon neutral and you're not anymore. Yeah, we are. We're just going to change how it's calculated so it all looks good. And one particular hobby horse of mine that I'll just leave you with on that topic is, whenever anybody said, oh, we're going to use carbon capture, that will fix it, that is somebody who's trying to gaslight you, pun intended, because carbon capture does not work, right? It does not work at the industrial scale it would need to. And even if it did, it costs enormous amount of power to do carbon capture. So it's a failing game.
It's the purpose.
A failing game. So yeah, no, that's the one that everybody wheels out all the time. Oh, we'll just do carbon capture, right? We can still use fossil fuels. We'll just capture the carbon before it goes into the atmosphere.
Right.
And it doesn't work.
You know, all of this brings me back to, I guess, especially kind of where I wanted to end up with this particular episode. I'm looking at the talking points I wrote down. I think we've covered a lot of them kind of indirectly in different ways. But the one area I wanted to make sure we came back to is the place that we're in right now, the state of tech and AI and the consolidation of compute. I don't think anybody in any of these big tech companies sat down 20 years ago and came up with a master plan to get us here. I don't think that's what happened at all, right?
Yeah.
And I've never, ever even thought that. What got us here, in my opinion, is as society, we have created a system that incentivizes short-term profits. It has incentivized companies to chase the next big thing at the expense of all else, or risk getting left behind and losing out on those short-term profit games. We are here now as a result of this system we have inadvertently created in society. And we are now in a state where, again, getting a little tinfoil hattish here, you've got control of AI, compute, vast amounts of computing power in the hands of a few. I don't think any of them set out to say, okay, we're going to control all compute in the world. Now the ingredients are present for that to be a possible outcome, though. Right? That is a possible outcome. The ingredients are there. It doesn't mean they're going to do it. But all it takes is for one actor to decide, you know what? I'm not going to do the right thing in this case. And as we've seen from several examples throughout this conversation, when one of them does something that is questionable or adversarial to the industry, then the next one does, and the next one, and the next one. And so, personally, I don't know, like, where that leaves us or our listeners. I wish I had the magic, go do this and it'll solve all our problems answer for you guys. But I guess my takeaway for this episode, and kind of where I've organically ended up with all of this, is whereas I used to be, yeah, let's move everything to the cloud. Everything goes to the cloud. I'm a big cloud guy, right? I think I've come back to I prefer on-prem side of the equation. I would rather have control of the hardware. I would rather control as much of the outcome as I can. That said, if you try to give me my Exchange server back, I will throw it back at you as hard as I possibly can.
Yeah, well, this is the problem, right? That's you don't have choices. That's the problem. And I completely agree with you. I think the at the very core of this whole dichotomy, what is driving what you're just saying, right? Like the big tech companies that don't want to be left behind. I mean, I think a major part of why Microsoft is doing what they're doing and chasing all of this at the rate they're chasing and really shoving it down everybody's throats so hard is because they are terrified of missing out, right?
Yeah.
Like they missed the internet, they missed the mobile phone, they nearly missed cloud, but they caught up. Now they're terrified of missing the AI thing, right? And I think fear is a very powerful driver, and competition is a very powerful driver. Now, the reason all of this is happening is that capitalism and tech companies have way too much power.
Yeah.
Because they have power over hundreds of millions of people's lives, right? Billions of people's lives. And I think the difference is that at least politicians nominally are meant to represent their constituents, whatever scale you're talking about, local councils all the way up to governments of whole countries, right? But companies do not, they don't answer to that. They only answer to shareholders, which is why you can have a company like Meta, who is completely morally bankrupt, right? Their way of fixing scams on their platform, right? So millions and millions of Americans and other people around the world meet their scam, whatever it is, on Facebook. Facebook's solution to that was not, we got to build it so that nobody can have a scam or that we minimize scam ads on our platform. The solution is, when we identify a scam platform, we charge them more for their ads. So the perverse incentive now is that if you are a manager at Meta, it's like, oh, we found more scammers, we get more money, we turn over more money. And the scammers are like, hey, great, you're giving me, what is it, 1 billion users? How many have Facebook got? I mean, they got a big platform, right? Lots of people. That's a great audience for my scams. Okay, I got to pay a bit more, but that's no big deal because I'm earning an enormous amount of money from all these people I'm scamming. Right? Now,
You don't
if
actually have to
you were
produce
running
product.
Meta, right? If you were Zuckerberg, the morality of the three of us in this call here, you'd go, that's not right. We shouldn't be doing that. That's terrible.
Right.
That's hurting society. That's hurting people. But the shareholders love it because there's lots of money. So let's just keep doing it.
And I guess that's my morals, because I when I think of the Facebook brand, I just feel disgust. Because of that, the other big news story that I remember coming out, boy, it might have been a year or two back now, the number one emotion that draws the most clicks for them. There was a study done on this. I'll have to dig up the article, but the number one emotion that draws the most clicks for them, and because of this, they push this particular emotion as much as possible, is outrage.
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 I got it. Yes. I knew that was the one. Yeah.
And so I would argue that Facebook has done more damage to the social fabric of society than just about any company on the planet. Mic drop.
Rupert, I agree with you, but Rupert Murdoch and his so-called news, also built on outrage, it's pretty close. Like that's Australia's contribution to the breakdown of the society, right? Is Rupert Murdoch and his right-wing news.
Well, note that I did say one of the worst.
Yeah, I agree with you. Absolutely. I agree with you.
So, man, this turned into a heavy episode, you guys. Like I had a feeling it would, but I just, like I said, you guys know, and our listeners that tune in regularly know, I always like to leave the listeners with like, hey, go do this or think about this. And unfortunately, I'm having a hard time coming up with that for this episode because we've identified this problem. This is happening. There's so much inertia that there's no one person that could stop this. I guess my only takeaway for listeners would be aware that as an industry, we are seeing a consolidation of compute into the hands of a few. And if having access to local compute is important for you and or your organization, be mindful and take steps to not trap yourself into cloud services somewhere along the line, right? I guess that would be my takeaway. I don't know if you guys have something you want to add to that.
There's something I really wanted to make sure we didn't skip, and it was I picked it out of your notes, and I thought we were going to talk about it more, and we didn't. With this consolidation that's happening right now, these AI models are. Well, look at Grok. Remember how they got in there and made it like say no matter what you did, you ask anything about Elon. Well, Elon is the greatest guy ever. You know, he
Yeah, yeah.
invented language and he invented math, and it couldn't say anything bad about Elon, and that's probably overtly a thing. But let's not fool ourselves into thinking they can't be much more subtle in the
Oh,
way
yeah.
they train their AI models. And by consolidating all these LLMs under the handful of a few people and then kind of getting it to where you don't have a choice but to use one, the influence that they can exert it cannot be overstated. There's
Astronomical.
Absolutely.
no way that it should horrify everybody. I mean, right as soon as Grok started doing that stuff, I'm like, this should be the screaming warning to everyone. This AI is not going to go the way you want it to go. Because and we've made a very big point here about like it's collecting stuff and it's taking your things away from you. It's stealing your autonomy from you. What happens when it starts trying to convince you reality isn't?
Mhm.
You know, and it does it subtly and slowly and over time. And I
Yep.
mean, we've seen you can manipulate a lot of people into believing a lot of things that aren't true. You can
Mhm.
do that. Imagine now the tool that you rely on every day is now subtly doing that to all of us, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
And all of us wanna believe that we can't fall for stuff. Well, we can, okay?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You can get like, I can I could spend a lot of time and I need to stop, but I just really wanna kinda drive that part home, and I also wanna go back to your same deal, Andy, is again, historian, there's always this question after something bad happens and they look at all the people who were standing there like, why didn't you do something? Right? Why didn't you stop this? Because you
Mhm.
outnumbered the bad guys 10-1. Why didn't you stop this? And the problem is one person can't do it, two people can't do it, five people can't do it, 10 people can't do it. You need a whole lot of people.
Mhm.
And all these things that are going on and that have always gone on. You look at any bad thing in history that happened, like, cruel regimes rising to power and everything, they built that base over years and years and
Mhm.
years. And by the time people were like, we really should do something about this, they had already cemented their power,
Mhm.
right? So it's going to take this huge effort. An individual, a group of individuals can't do anything but kind of resist. To actually stop it is going to require at least as much effort as went into building it in the first place. And all of these regimes and things and this AI stuff took years to build. It's going to take years
Yeah.
to circumvent. I don't think we're going to dismantle it per se, but to kind of that opposing force has to rise, right? So it's like you said, Andy, like how do I tell people, what are you as a person supposed to walk away with? You need to walk away first of all with the awareness that this is a bad thing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem bad, especially like my day to day hasn't really changed much. Yours hasn't either. I get that. It's a bad thing and it's coming. And they always talk about the adage of the frog in the boiling pot. Well, it's
Mhm.
bull. It
Mhm.
doesn't happen. You put a frog in a pot of water, no matter how slow you raise the temperature, he's going to jump out before he boils to death. Period. But the problem is, by time he does that, he can already be permanently damaged.
Yeah, that's right.
And this is where we are. We're not there yet, but we're approaching that point where even if we're going to react, we're going to stop it. It's going to something else is going to happen. Either be something worse that steps on that, or they're going to run out of money and these data centers are gonna be abandoned and
Yep.
empty, and then RAM will be like a nickel because you can just walk into an open, you know what I mean?
It'll become the
Or
new currency.
yeah,
It'll be like caps in the Fallout series of video games.
exactly. So, yeah, I I would really love to say, "Here's what we need to do to stop it." I don't have an answer for that, but probably the best thing I can tell you is anytime because these things happen all the time politically and in business and everything else. They can't ever maintain it. They can never hold that together. It always falls apart somewhere or another. It's just how much damage did they do on the way down is the
Yep,
real question.
that's right. So
Well,
I
that
have
wasn't
two
as positive as I wanted. I'm sorry, but
Yeah, well, I mean, I got two comments and then one wrap up. And my first comment is probably, well, you were saying it's heavy. Well, reality is heavy. I mean, that's the point, right? Like
True.
we can't sit in our IT server rooms and say everything is fine. I'll just keep these servers running and it has no effect on anything around me, right? I think that's probably the takeaway. So my one comment that I didn't mention before, just read about Microsoft's earnings calls, which was only a few days ago. And one of the surprising things was, tying back to your earlier comment way back, Eric, was Microsoft is seeing a huge increase in the sale of Office 2024. So the Office version you run on premises that does not
Yup.
rely on Office 365, your local thing. And they they couldn't quite explain it. They said, we don't really know why, but
why would they do that? I don't
it's
get it.
most
Yeah.
of it. So I thought that was funny. And she said, oh, it'll probably normalize next quarter, but maybe it won't. Maybe people are going, well, maybe we will have some more control here.
Yeah. People are
So
not nearly as stupid, and
no,
I honestly believe it's that whole thing of, well, but this is the way we've always been able to
yeah,
influence, and we've always been able to do that.
yeah. And it
Not
just
how
doesn't work
anymore.
long term. So my takeaway is sort of similar to yours as well. I think awareness is huge. I think as IT professionals, particularly younger ones that I spent years and years and years teaching, I was always trying to instill in them as much as I could that you're not just a professional in an industry that has very little to do with anything except making your business run more efficiently or something. You're actually part of an industry, and digital technology is changing society, whether we're talking about Meta
Yep.
or Google as an ad broker or whatever else we're talking, well, the concentration of AI power as we're talking about in this. Like, technology companies and digital technology is hugely changing society. And your job is not just doing your daily job, but also seeing a bit in the future. What does this actually mean for my business? When we do our risk assessments, where's our risk actually at? Well, what is the risk assessment now should be, what happens if Microsoft turns off Office 365 for my business because I'm in a country that they don't like or the government of the US doesn't like and they're
Mm-hmm.
turning it off for me? Right? Like, and lots of companies worldwide are now making that part of their risk register, right? What actually happens if they do that? Or what happens if they decide to take away a mailbox like they did for that guy in the international court in the EU? He was critical of Trump, so they just took his mailbox away, like literally just took it away. Um, and that organization is now saying, well, hey, we can't host our stuff on Office 365 anymore because that's not reliable. So I think being aware of it, and it's obviously contextual to what company you are, where you are, what industry you're working in, what level you are in your company, whatever, but being aware that this is happening. And it's not just, hey, let's just implement the latest AI model, tying back to what you said, Eric, about Grok, right? Like, I've read several things and watched videos on what Grok has done, the whole Mecha Hitler thing and stuff. And then I hear people that I respect who are tech people and they say, oh, yeah, I used Grok AI for this and that. And I'm like, you can't use that. That's like you saying, I won't use Google, right, for anything real. Well, I won't use Google for anything real exactly for the same reason as you. But if I was using an AI model, I would never touch Grok. Right?
Nope.
Why do I
Same.
want Mecha Hitler in my answers? That's insane. There's plenty of other
Same.
models, right, that do have good guardrails that I can use, right? They're also questionably morally, perhaps, but not as questionable as Grok. You know what I mean? That's just not a conversation. It's insane. So being aware and understanding that your choices actually make a difference, right? That's exactly what you were saying about, you don't buy books at Amazon anymore, you buy them somewhere else, because supporting Amazon, even in a small way like that, is not a good thing.
Yeah. And I think over time, enough people start making small changes like this, maybe all that effort that you were talking about, Eric, will start to coalesce and start to. Inertia is a hard thing to stop.
Mhm.
You need that equal and opposite force to push back on that inertia, right? And it's going to take
And
a
I
lot of
think
work.
sorry, the last thing I want to wrap up with is I also think that the thing that's going to kickstart the shift is going to be the bubble breaking, because
Yep.
there's no way that this AI hype is going to keep going, right? We're riding a hype cycle. It's going to crash and then eventually turn into a technology that we all use and is great, helps us a bit, but it's not the hype thing. And
Yep.
that is going to be huge because there is so much money in it. I
Yep.
think I heard only a few days ago, like $2 trillion invested in building AI data centers. That's an enormous amount of money, right? And when that crashes, it's going to be all these half-built data centers that aren't worth as much anymore and not going to bring the investors the money back. So,
Yep.
It's gonna make the dot-com bubble look like small potatoes.
Oh, it
yep.
really is. And I think really the way that we can get around this as individuals is basically we just start today using so think like the doomsday prepper. You always have a go bag.
Mhm.
Got a bag of money and my IDs and everything I need right there. All I gotta do is grab it and get out, right? Have a plan B. So Microsoft shuts your mailboxes off. Who's the provider? Who's your second mail provider you're gonna go
Yeah.
to? Uh, Cloud, I guess, if you have to. I do as much on-prem as possible. I always have. I've never really felt entirely comfortable with the cloud for a lot of I don't wanna say nothing, but I've always been like, let's be a realist about it and not use it because we can. So many things are cloud for cloud's sake, and I will never do that. So kind of missed the bubble. But whatever you have that is dependent on one of these, start thinking about what your plan B is today.
Yep.
And if you can, maybe implement it if it's actually worth it. You know, there's a thing that goes around every so often, like vote with your wallet. Well, you kind of actually can do that. And so a lot of people are kind of waking up like, well, not only is Amazon kind of a turd of a company, but they're not as good as they were 10 years
Mhm.
ago. They're not
Yep.
as reliable with things. They don't have, they carry garbage more than quality. So just don't buy it from Amazon next time. And if everybody starts doing that, Amazon starts losing money. And if Amazon starts losing money, they don't have the power to do this stuff. It's all based on we're giving them the power that they're using against us.
Yeah.
We really are. And that's probably the only thing we can do. But like Paul said earlier, a lot of this stuff we can't. I can't go manufacturing RAM chips in the backyard. I can't do that. But I can try to find other places to spend my money.
Mhm.
And so can
Yeah.
everyone else.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
let's not all buy from the same place. Let's buy from different places. Let's show them that what the enshittification, I believe, is a direct result of consolidation. All these companies
Mhm.
buying each other up, they no longer have meaningful competition. Without competition, they have no incentive to do better. So they don't.
Yep.
So make them compete again. That's what we can
Yeah.
do. We can make them compete again by saying, if I have an alternative, I will do it. Even if it's a short-term pain, maybe I don't get second day shipping with bookshop.org, but I get my books, uh, you know,
Yeah.
so on and so forth.
Hmm.
Yep. Boy, good episode, gents. I appreciate this conversation. I wrote out my outline of all the different things I wanted to cover, and I think we covered most of it, just not in the
Great.
order I had
No.
planned. It's been a great discussion. So it's good having you guys on as always. I was glad I could get you both on for this one. So appreciate your time, both of you.
Well, thank you for having me on. I always appreciate talking to you, Paul. We don't talk enough, so
Likewise. I thoroughly enjoyed that. I hope our listeners enjoyed that and get something useful out of it. I did drop a link in about how carbon capture doesn't work as well from an actual scientist that talks
Oh
about it.
yeah, I'll be sure
Doesn't
to include that too.
well worth watching. But yeah, thank you both. This was I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And those of you watching, I really appreciate you spending some time with us. I'd love to hear your take on this too.
Mhm.
I would love to hear what you're gonna do to deal with this. Are you gonna make any changes? For example, again, a little tinfoil hatish, but I now run an apt cacher ng service inside my home lab that caches every single Debian package that I use inside of my home lab. So if for some reason the Debian repos ever become unavailable, guess what? I can still install the bits that I'm currently using. So again, little tinfoil hatish of me, but I have to entertain myself somehow. So, but other than that, I'd love, all jokes aside, I'd love to hear what you guys have to say on this topic. And it's a perfect opportunity to remind everyone that we now have discussion boards available out on our GitHub repo. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. So, again, kind of an not old, but older forum style. community hangout as opposed to the sometimes crazy Discord method, right, where you just have lines and lines of chat happening. I like the forum method because it's searchable. I'm not going to go into that whole thing. That'd be another 10 minutes here talking about something unrelated to today's episode. But anyway, I'll put a link to that in the show notes, folks. But with that, appreciate you spending some time with us. And we will catch you again next week for a future episode of SysAdmin Weekly. Have a good one.